The departures board at Incheon International Airport said, London Heathrow, boarding, and Zola Adebisi had her passport in one hand and her boarding pass in the other, and 40 minutes before she would walk through a gate and leave South Korea, and the last 6 weeks of her life, exactly where she was leaving them. Behind her, where things that had grown complicated were supposed to go. She was good at leaving. She had been good at it since she was 12 years old and had watched her father leave first and learned in the specific and permanent way that children learn things they were never meant to, that the people who stay are the ones worth building for, and the ones who leave are the ones you learn to walk away from before they can do it to you. She was at gate 47, second row of seats, her carry-on beside her and the rest of her life in a storage unit in Peckham, waiting for her to come back and resume it. When she heard her name, not shouted, not frantic, spoken in the precise, level register of a man who had decided something and was stating it. Zola! She looked up. Kwon Jae-il was standing at the entrance to the gate, holding nothing. No bag, no phone, no jacket, as if he had come from somewhere very fast and had not stopped for any of those things. His suit was the same dark gray he had been wearing when she last saw him, 12 hours ago, standing at the door of the Kwon estate, watching her get into a car. He looked like a man who had not slept, which was accurate, because she had also not slept, and she knew what that looked like because she had been looking at her own face in the bathroom mirror of a Seoul hotel room at 5 in the morning for the last hour. The gate area looked at him. People in departure lounges notice disruptions the way people in quiet rooms notice sound. Reflexively, involuntarily, before they have decided to pay attention. Don't get on that plane, he said. She looked at him for a moment. She had spent the last 6 weeks in the same building as this man, had spent one entire evening beside him playing a role she had agreed to, had spent the hours after that in conversations she had not planned for and could not now unhave, and she had done all of this while reminding herself at every useful interval that the arrangement had been specific and temporary and was not a story she was living in. It was a contract she had fulfilled. She looked at him and she said, "You told me it was one night." "I know what I told you," he said. "Then you know this is the morning after." Zola, Jae-il. Her voice was even. She was proud of how even it was. "I have a flight. I know you have a flight." He had not moved from the entrance of the gate. Around them, the other passengers were performing the specific airport theater of pretending not to watch something that was very clearly worth watching. "I'm asking you not to take it." She stood up. Not toward him. She was not ready to be any closer to this than she already was. She stood up because she needed to be on her feet for what she was about to say, because her body had decided that sitting down was not the correct posture for this particular conversation. "The arrangement was one night," she said. "The gala. Nothing after. Those were your words. I know. You were very specific. I was. So what changed?" He looked at her across the rows of departure seats, across the ambient noise of an airport terminal at 7 in the morning, across the 6 weeks of a story she had told herself was not a story. He said, "I lied." She went very still. "About what?" "Not about the arrangement," he said. "The arrangement was what I said it was. One night, I lied about being fine when you left." She did not say anything. The departures board behind her changed. "London Heathrow. Final boarding. You have 40 minutes, he said. "You don't have to stay. I am asking you to stay. Those are different things, and I want you to understand that I know they're different." She looked at him. She looked at her boarding pass. She looked at him again. "Let me tell you how we got here. Because this story does not start at gate 47, and it does not start with a man crossing an international airport terminal in a suit, with no jacket, and no phone, and no plan except to say one thing to a woman he had told he would let go. It starts 6 weeks earlier, in the steel and glass skeleton of a building that Zola Adebisi had been hired to make into something worth being inside, and in the specific and unexpected way that two people who have decided not to feel things can nonetheless end up feeling everything. If stories about unlikely propositions, impossible evenings, and the kind of feeling that survives all your best attempts to walk away from it are the reason you're here, subscribe, like this video, and tell me in the comments where in the world you're watching from. Now let's go back to the beginning. Zola had come to Seoul for the building, not for any of the other things that Seoul would eventually offer her. The food, the pace of it, the specific quality of light on the Han River in early autumn, that made her want to sit at windows for longer than was professionally justified. She had come for the Kwan Medical Holdings Research Center, a 40-story mixed-use facility in Yeongdeungpo that was 6 months from opening and had an atrium the size of a concert hall that needed, according to the brief she had received in July, to feel like the inside of a human body at its healthiest. Organic, warm, structured and alive at once. Zola's firm, Adebisi Interiors, 3 years old and already in the kind of conversations that firms twice its age were still trying to get into, had won the contract over 11 other companies. She knew why they had won. She had written the concept brief herself, at 2 in the morning in her Peckham studio, and she had written it the way she wrote every brief, not for the client but for the building. What does this space need to feel like? What does it need to hold? What does it need to say before anyone inside it says anything at all? The brief had said, enter this building and feel that something here has been built in service of life, that recovery is possible, that the body's intelligence is respected. She had won by a margin that the procurement committee had apparently described as not close. She arrived in Seoul in the second week of September with 2 associates, a project timeline, and the particular focused energy she brought to every new space. The energy of someone who had been doing this long enough to know what a building needed, and short enough in years to still find buildings genuinely extraordinary. The Kwan Research Center atrium was extraordinary. She knew it the moment she walked in, before any of the cladding was installed, before the lighting rigs were in place. The bones of it were right. Whoever had designed the architectural shell had understood proportion the way some people understand music. Intuitively, in the body before the mind. She had stood in the center of the unfinished space on day 1 and looked up at 40 stories of steel framework and had felt, in the private way she felt things she did not discuss professionally, something that was not quite joy but was its closest available cousin. She went to work. She had learned her profession from her mother, who was a contractor, and from her mother's mother, who had built 2 houses in Lagos with her own hands, and from a childhood spent understanding that the spaces people inhabit become, over time, the shape of the people who inhabit them. This was not mysticism, it was observation. A room that told you that you were small made you smaller. A room that told you that you were capable gave you somewhere to be capable in. Zola designed rooms that told the truth about what was possible. Her assistant on this project was a Korean-Nigerian woman named Dami. Full name, Adayaze Damilola Kim. A detail that had made Zola look up from the CV, with something between amusement and recognition. 25, Seoul born and raised, mother Korean, father Nigerian, warm, quick, organized in the specific way of people who manage chaos by anticipating it. She had attached herself to Zola on day 2, with the professional commitment of someone who had decided that this was the project, and this was the person she was going to learn from, and Zola had accepted this the way she accepted most useful things, without extensive comment. You know who owns this building, Dami said, on the 3rd day, handing Zola a coffee on the scaffold level. Kwan Medical Holdings, Zola said. Kwan J-il, Dami said. He's 34. His grandfather built the pharmaceutical company. His father expanded it into healthcare real estate. He took it global. He's on Forbes. He has never once been photographed at a social event with the same woman twice. She paused. My friend who works in the Kwan Tower admin says the senior staff refer to him as the Glacier. Professionally, not as an insult. I'm here for the building, Zola said. I know, Dami said. I'm just giving you the landscape. She had seen him first from the scaffold on the 14th day. He had come into the atrium in the early morning, before the construction crew arrived, when the space had the specific quality of emptiness that buildings have before they are inhabited, the quality that Zola found most useful, because empty buildings told you things that furnished ones concealed. He stood at the base of the atrium and looked up and did the same thing she had done on day 1. Looked at the bones of the space with the attention of someone reading a language they understood. He was there for approximately 6 minutes. He didn't speak to anyone. He left before the site team arrived. She had thought, he checks on his buildings the same way I do. In the quiet, before the noise. She had not thought anything else about it, or told herself she hadn't. She was on the atrium floor at 7:45 on a Tuesday evening, 6 weeks into her time in Seoul, and 4 days before the end of her contract, adjusting the placement of the biophilic installation that formed the atrium's central column. a vertical garden structure running 12 stories high, engineered to hold 240 species of plant in a system that kept them alive without visible infrastructure. When she heard footsteps on the polished concrete behind her, she did not turn around immediately. Footsteps in an empty building had a grammar. These ones were deliberate, evenly paced, unhurried in the way that belonged to someone who owned the floor they were walking on. She said, without turning, "I have authorization to be here until 9. "I know," Kwon Jae-il said. "I approved the extended access." She turned. He was closer than she had expected. 8 feet, maybe, which was close enough for her to register details she had not had from 14 stories up. The exact quality of his stillness, which was not the stillness of someone waiting, but the stillness of someone who was fully present and saw no need to demonstrate that with movement. The specific way he was looking at the installation, which was the way she had learned to identify people who saw structures rather than surfaces. "It's extraordinary," he said. He meant the installation. "It will be," she said. "It needs 2 more weeks to root properly. Right now it's still deciding whether it trusts the structure." He looked at her then, the first time, directly. Something shifted in his expression. Not much, a fraction, the kind of micro-adjustment that you only catch if you are paying the right kind of attention. "Does it make that kind of decision?" he said. "Growing things make that kind of decision constantly," she said. "They assess the environment. They commit or they don't. You can't rush it." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I need to ask you something." She waited. He told her about the gala, his grandfather's 80th birthday, a formal event at the Kwon family estate in 3 days, 200 guests, the extended family, the company's senior leadership, several government figures his grandfather had known for 40 years. He told her that his mother had, without his knowledge and without his consent, extended a personal invitation to Yoon So-young, the daughter of Yoon Pharmaceuticals chairman, and that Seo-young's attendance at a Kwon family celebration, in the particular social grammar of the world they moved in, meant something publicly that he had not agreed to mean. He had discovered this 2 days ago. He had not yet found a way to address it that did not create a scene at his grandfather's celebration, which he was not going to do. He needed someone beside him, someone whose presence was unambiguous. For one evening, she looked at him. "You're asking me to pretend to be your wife." "My partner," he said. "The distinction matters to me." "Why me?" He appeared to consider whether to answer directly. He decided to. "Because you are not from my world," he said. "No one at that gala will know you, which means no one will have a prior narrative about you that I will have to manage. Because I have watched you work for 6 weeks in my building, and I understand the kind of person you are, which means I trust the judgment you'll exercise in a room full of people who are looking for weakness." A pause. "And because you are leaving Seoul in 4 days, which means there is no long-term complexity." She looked at him for a long moment. He did not look away. "What do I get?" she said. "Name it." The Kwon Group has satellite medical centers in Lagos, Nairobi, and Accra. Interior contracts not yet assigned. I want consideration. A real pitch meeting, not a courtesy one. He looked at her the way he had looked at the installation, with the attention of someone assessing structural honesty. "Done," he said. She said, "One night, the gala. Nothing after that." "Agreed," he said. She said, "I'll need to know everything about your family before I walk into that room. I'll send a briefing document tonight. And I'll need a dress." He almost smiled. It was not quite a smile, it was the thing a smile was made of, existing at the surface, without breaking through. "My assistant will contact you in the morning." She turned back to the installation. "Good night, Mr. Kwon," he said. "Jae-seal." She did not turn around. "Good night, Jae-seal." She heard him leave. She stood in the empty building beside the vertical garden that was still deciding whether to trust its structure, and she thought, "One night, that is a very specific and manageable amount of time." She was not thinking about the way he had looked at the installation, as if it were a language he understood. She was not thinking about that at all. The Kwon family estate in Songbuk-dong had been built in 1962 by Kwon Dae-jung, the founder, the grandfather, the man whose name was still spoken first in any sentence about the company, even though he had been chairman emeritus for 15 years. It sat behind a wall of old stone on a hill that overlooked the north of the city, and it had the quality that only certain buildings had. The quality of knowing exactly what it was, not performing grandeur, containing it. Zola arrived in a car Jael had sent at 7, wearing a dress that his assistant had delivered that morning. Deep burgundy, structured at the shoulder, the kind of garment that had been selected by someone with excellent taste, or by someone following the instructions of someone with excellent taste. She had spent the morning reading the briefing document he had sent at 11 the previous night. 42 pages. Family history, key relationships, social dynamics, what to say and what to avoid. It was the most thorough brief she had ever received for anything, including buildings. She knew, by the time the car reached the estate gates, that Kwon Dae-jung was 80 today and had built his pharmaceutical company from a single drug formulation in a rented laboratory and had 4 children, 11 grandchildren, and opinions about everything. That Jae-il was the eldest grandchild and had taken the chairman role at 29 when his father became ill. That the man had run a global conglomerate for 5 years without a single reported personal scandal, which in the circles he moved in was either remarkable discipline or remarkable privacy. That he had lost someone 3 years ago, the briefing said, personal loss, not for discussion, and she had not pushed, and had not attended a family event with anyone beside him since. She had also spent approximately 40 of the preceding 60 hours deciding whether she was making a reasonable professional decision or a different kind of decision that she was telling herself was professional. She had decided not to resolve this question before entering the building. Jae-il was waiting at the top of the estate steps. He looked different outside of a hard hat site and a construction brief. He looked like what he was, the chairman of a significant company, in a dark suit that had been made for him specifically, standing at the top of stone steps in the way that some people stand in spaces that belong to them, not asserting it, just inhabiting it as fact. He saw the car. He came down the steps and opened the door himself, which she registered as a thing his driver had clearly been ready to do. "You read the briefing," he said as she stepped out. "All 42 pages. You have questions." "Several. I'll ask them later." She looked up at the estate. Light came through every window, 200 voices somewhere inside. She could feel the weight of the evening before she had walked into it. "Your grandmother's portrait in the East Corridor. She died in 2019. Do your relatives still find it difficult to walk past it, or has it become comfortable?" He looked at her with the quality of attention she was becoming familiar with. The complete, unperformed kind. "Difficult," he said. "My grandfather stops there every time." "Then I won't guide any conversation toward that corridor," she said. "Ready?" He offered his arm. She took it. They walked into the estate together. The entrance hall was everything the briefing had suggested, and several things it hadn't. High ceilings, old art, the Korean masters, ink on silk, framed in lacquered wood. Flowers that cost more than Zola's monthly Peckham rent, arranged with the precise artlessness of someone who understood that flowers arranged too carefully looked afraid. Guests in formal dress moving through the space with the managed ease of people who had been to many events like this and had decided how they were going to appear in them long before arrival. Every single person in the first room looked at Zola. Not obviously, not rudely, the practiced glance and catalog of a world that monitored itself through peripheral vision. She felt it the way she always felt being the only black woman in a room. Not as assault, not as hostility, but as the specific awareness of being visible in a way that required no effort and could not be turned off. She had been the only black woman in many rooms. She had learned to meet that visibility the same way she met difficult buildings, by standing fully inside it rather than making herself smaller to reduce the surface area. She stood up straight and looked at the room with the calm interest of a woman who found it worth looking at. Jael's hand moved slightly on her arm. A pressure, brief, that said, "I see what you're doing, and it is exactly right." She did not look at him. She kept looking at the room. And that was the moment. That small, wordless exchange, that something shifted between them into a territory that had not been in the briefing document. The grandfather found them in the second room. Kwon Dae-jung was 80 today, and looked, Zola thought, like a man who had built something and knew it was going to outlast him, and had decided to be peaceful about this, rather than sad about it. He was smaller than his photographs, which was true of most people whose presence was larger than their body. He had eyes that moved quickly and settled slowly, and they settled on Zola with the specific quality of someone who had made an assessment and was now confirming it against direct evidence. Zola Adebisi, he said. Not a question. She looked at Jael for a fraction of a second. He looked back. He was equally surprised. Yes, she said. Happy birthday, Chairman Kwan. I know your work, the old man said. He said it the way people said things they had been waiting to say. Simply, without preamble. Because they had already done the waiting. The biophilic installation in my atrium. I visited the site last week at 6 in the morning. My grandson's security team thought I had lost my mind. A pause. The quality of his gaze was warm and precise at once, like very good light. I stood at the base of it for 20 minutes. I felt... He searched for the word with the patience of someone who understood that the right word was worth the pause. Repaired. Zola held the weight of that word. It was the best review she had ever received for anything. That's everything I was trying to do, she said. The grandfather looked at his grandson. Something passed between them that Zola could not read, but that had the quality of a man seeing something he had been hoping to see for a long time. Take care of her, the old man said, to Jael. And then he was moving, because he was the guest of honor and the room needed him, and he went, she said, quietly, to Jael. He knows who I am. He visited the site last week, Jael said. He was looking at the direction his grandfather had gone. His expression was doing something complex and contained. I didn't know. He said repaired, Zola said. Yes. She looked at him. He was looking at the room, but she had the sense that he was not seeing the room. She filed this. She filed the word repaired. She thought, there is something in this family that needed repairing, and the old man walked into a building and found it in a vertical garden and did not tell his grandson. What was broken? Who broke it? She did not ask. She was here for one night. She arrived at 9:15 with the precision of someone who understood that the best entrance was not the first one and not the last one, but the one that landed after the room had settled into itself and before it had committed to its final shape. Yoon So-young was 29, the only child of Yoon Pharmaceuticals chairman, and she moved through the estate's main hall with the particular quality of someone who had been told, for long enough, that rooms like this were her eventual destination. She was beautiful in the specific architectural way of a woman who had never had to compete for attention and had therefore never developed any of the anxious, striving quality that competition produced. She was simply present, and presence, in this room, on this evening, carried enormous weight. She found Jae-il in under 2 minutes. Zola felt him register the arrival before she saw it herself. A micro-tightening in the arm beside her, almost nothing, the physical equivalent of a held breath. And then the deliberate release of it, the choice to be exactly where he was. So-young came with her mother, who was the kind of woman who had spent 30 years being the wife of a powerful man, and had turned that position into a power of its own. The mother smiled at Jael with the warmth of someone who considered a matter already settled. This was the most clarifying thing Zola observed in the first 10 seconds. Then So-young's eyes found Zola. The calculation happened quickly, and was almost entirely invisible. What So-young was adding up. Unexpected, unannounced, foreign, black, standing inside Jae-il's personal space, rather than beside it. Which meant either a professional associate or something closer. The result of the calculation produced, in So-young's expression, the briefest flash of something, not hostility, something more interesting, genuine surprise, and beneath the surprise, the specific recalibration of someone who had walked into a room with a script and has just realized the room has a different one. She greeted Jae-il in Korean, warm, practiced, the warmth of the long-established rather than the newly interested. Then she looked at Zola and said, in English that was precise and slightly formal, I don't believe we've met. Zola Adebisi, Zola said, with the full, direct warmth of someone who had nothing to perform. She offered her hand. I've been in Seoul for the Kwan Research Center project. Do you know the building? It's extraordinary. The bones of that atrium are some of the best structural work I've seen in this region. So-young took the hand. You're an architect. Interior architect. The distinction matters to me. She heard Jae-il, at her left, make the quietest possible sound that was entirely not a laugh and was absolutely a laugh. So-young's mother had not spoken. She was looking at the scene with the focused attention of someone doing very fast arithmetic. How long have you been in Seoul? So-young asked. The question was aimed at gathering information, not making conversation. 6 weeks, Zola said. I leave Sunday. A pause. The arithmetic in the mother's eyes changed quality. Seo Young looked at Jae-il. He looked back at her with the level, unhurried composure that she now understood was his full armor. Not coldness, but the absolute refusal to provide whatever signal someone was hoping to extract from him. Enjoy the evening, he said. They moved on. When they were 6 steps away, Zola said, very quietly, looking straight ahead, her mother was calculating something. Yes, he said. She stopped calculating when I said Sunday. Yes. They think I'm temporary. A beat. They're not wrong, he said. The words were factual. They landed with the specific, dull weight of accurate things that you didn't want to be accurate. She registered this and set it aside. She was here for one night. She had always been temporary. That was the arrangement. But somewhere in the atrium of the Kwan Research Center, a vertical garden was deciding whether to trust its structure. She was not thinking about that. Kwan Se-won found Zola alone at 10:30. She had stepped away from Jae-il for 12 minutes. He had been pulled into a conversation with a government minister that could not be briefly concluded, and she had read the room correctly enough to know that her presence in that specific conversation would create more complexity than her absence, and so she had collected a glass of water and positioned herself near the East Wing terrace with the professional composure of a woman who had spent a career in rooms where she was the outsider and had turned that position into a form of clarity. Jae-il's mother was 58 and had the bearing of a woman who had been managing a great deal for a long time and had become so skilled at the management that most people around her did not understand they were being managed. She was elegant and precise, and she looked at Zola with the specific quality of someone who had already completed their assessment and was now delivering the conclusions. Miss Adebisi, she said. Mrs. Kwan. Zola held her gaze without adjusting it. I understand you've been working on the research center. Yes. For 6 weeks. Extraordinary coincidence, the mother said, that you and my son found each other in that context. The word coincidence was placed with the delicacy of someone who did not believe in coincidences. Zola looked at her. Something cold moved through her. Not fear, recognition. She had the specific sensation of a woman who has just understood that the room she is standing in is larger than the room she thought she walked into. Is it a coincidence? She said. Kwan Se-won smiled. It was the smile of someone who had not expected to be asked this directly and found the directness, if not admirable, at least interesting. You are very good at your work, she said. Your firm was selected through a competitive process. That is completely true. But, Zola said. But I read every submission, the mother said. And when I saw yours, an African woman, temporary, here for a specific project, leaving in 6 weeks, I thought, this is someone who can give my son a reason to open a door he has kept closed for 3 years. A pause. Without creating complications he cannot manage. The terrace was very quiet. Below them, the garden of the Kwan estate was dark and formal and did not care about the conversation happening above it. You used me, Zola said, not loudly, with the flatness of someone arriving at a fact. I invested in a possibility, the mother said. You were never in any danger. Nothing was taken from you. You were given a prestigious contract that your firm genuinely deserved. And positioned, Zola said, so that your son would find me, in his building, on his schedule. She thought about the scaffold, and the morning she had seen him, and every subsequent moment she had filed as coincidence. How many times did you arrange for him to be at the site when I was there? The mother was quiet. Twice, Zola said. At least twice. The morning before the launch and the evening, he came to ask me. You told him I'd be there late. The silence confirmed it. Zola set her water glass down on the terrace railing. She did it with the specific care of someone who was managing something very large, with very controlled hands. Does he know? She said. No, the mother said. Are you going to tell him? I think, Kwan Se-won said, that by the time this evening is over, the question of how it started will matter considerably less than what it became. She paused. My son has not looked at anyone the way he looks at you in 3 years. I have been watching him all evening. I know my son. That does not make what you did acceptable, Zola said. No, the mother said. It doesn't. And for the first time in the conversation, she looked, if not ashamed, then aware of the difference between a calculation, and a person. I am asking you not to leave before the evening is over. Whatever you decide to do with what I've told you, wait until it's over, for his grandfather's sake, if not for mine." Zola looked at her for a long moment. She turned and went back inside. Comment truth below if you think she deserves to know everything. Because what happens in the next hour is going to change every question you think you're asking. She found Jael at the edge of the main hall. The government conversation finally concluded, and she stood beside him and looked at the room and did not say anything for 30 seconds. He said, "You look like something happened." "Something happened," she said. He turned to look at her fully. She could feel the quality of his attention shift from the ambient to the specific. "What?" She opened her mouth. She was going to tell him. She had decided in the walk from the terrace that honesty was the only thing she had left in a room where everything else had been arranged without her knowledge, and she was going to tell him, clearly and completely, what his mother had said. Then the silver bell rang. In the Kwan family, Dami had told her early in the project the silver bell meant a toast. Formal. Everyone stops. Everyone listens. It was the grandfather's tradition, 30 years old, and the room responded to it the way rooms respond to traditions that have been honored long enough to become reflexes, immediately and completely. The guests assembled. Kwan Dae-jung stood at the center with a glass and the unhurried ease of a man at home in any room that had ever existed. Beside him stood Jael's mother, and beside her, with a champagne glass and a smile that Zola now understood with sickening clarity, had not arrived by accident tonight, stood Yoon So-young's father, Chairman Yoon Byung-chul. She felt Jael go still, not the controlled stillness, the other kind. Chairman Yoon began to speak. He spoke about the Kwan and Yoon families, about shared history in the pharmaceutical industry, about the particular pleasure of this evening, Chairman Kwan Dae-jung's 80th, a celebration of legacy, of the things that endure. He spoke warmly and at length, and with the specific comfort of a man who believed he was delivering news that everyone in the room had already processed. Then he said, "And I think we can all agree that tonight is also a moment to celebrate the future. The joining of these two great families, formalized this spring, and tonight, in front of the people who matter most, is something that I know Dae-jung has long hoped for." The room applauded. Joel did not move. Zola looked at him. His face was a piece of controlled sculpture. Nothing visible, nothing breaking. Nothing that anyone in this room, who did not know how to read the difference between stillness and suppression, would identify as distress. But she had been learning, over 6 weeks of watching a man check his building at 6 in the morning, before his crew arrived, exactly what this particular stillness meant. He had not known. He had not known about this public announcement. Not this version of it. Not tonight. Not here. His mother had not told him it was going this far. She reached across and took his hand. Not for the room. She did not look around to see if anyone noticed. She took his hand because he was standing beside her, receiving something in public that should not have been done to him in public, and she was not going to let him stand there alone, arrangement or no arrangement, 1 night or 40 years. His hand closed around hers. In the room, someone near the front began to turn, curious, to find Jael's face, the performance of the audience in the moment when the subject of a toast must respond. Several people found him. Several people found Zola beside him, their hands joined, and added this to the equation they were running. Chairman Yoon finished his toast. The room drank. Jael turned to Zola and said, very quietly, "I need 5 minutes." "Take them," she said. "I'll be here." He went. She stood in the room alone and looked at the space the way she looked at every difficult space, with the question of what it needed. What it needed right now was time. She would give it time. She turned to the nearest person, an older woman who had been watching the toast with the expression of someone who had also not expected it, and said, pleasantly, "The orchids in the East Corridor are extraordinary. Do you know who arranged them?" The older woman blinked, then smiled, grateful for ordinary ground. "The estate's head gardener," she said. "He's been here for 30 years. Zola listened. She kept the room's attention from collecting around the space where Jael had been. She gave him his 5 minutes by making sure the room found other things to look at. She was good at what spaces needed. He came back in 9 minutes. She knew, before he reached her, that something had resolved in him. Not settled, but decided. There is a difference. Settled is peace. Decided is the thing that comes before peace when peace is not yet available. They walked together to a small room off the east corridor that the briefing document had identified as the family library, used now for guests needing quiet, lined with books that had been read and not merely owned, lit with the warm, low light of a room that understood its purpose. He closed the door. He said, "My mother arranged this, the Yoon Alliance, without telling me the announcement would be tonight." "I know," Zola said. He looked at her. "You knew?" "I knew 20 minutes ago. Your mother told me on the terrace." He went very still. "The controlled kind. She told you?" "Yes." "What did she tell you?" Zola considered how to say it. She chose the way she always handled difficult structural truths, directly, without decoration, because decoration was kindness to the teller and not to the listener. She said she read my firm's tender submission and specifically selected it because I was African, temporary, and leaving in 6 weeks. She thought I would be safe, that I would open a door you had closed without creating complications. She paused. "She arranged at least 2 of your visits to the construction site. She positioned us. She used me as a mechanism to make you more receptive to the Yoon arrangement by giving you something warmer first." He sat down. Not dramatically, just sat down on the arm of the library's leather Chesterfield, with the specific quality of a man absorbing something that is reordering a significant amount of what he thought he understood about the last 6 weeks. The room was quiet. Somewhere past the closed door the party continued, the Silver Bell's announcement moving through it like a stone through water, the ripples still going outward, people still recalculating. "She did not tell you," Zola said. "Whatever was between us over the last weeks, she did not manufacture that. She put us in proximity. What happened in proximity was ours." He looked up. "I am not absolving her," Zola said. "What she did was a manipulation, and it used both of us, and it was wrong. I am saying the building is real, the conversations were real. What I felt watching you check the vertical garden before the crew arrived every morning, I did not feel that because your mother arranged for me to be there." He said, "What did you feel?" She looked at him. "Recognized," she said. "I felt recognized. Like someone who also reads the bones of things when the room is empty and the noise is gone." She paused. "I don't feel that often. I don't let myself, usually. I learned early that the people worth building for are not always the people who stay." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, in the way he said most things, quietly, precisely, without performance, "My fiancé died 3 years ago." She waited. "A car accident. I found out afterward that she had been pregnant. She hadn't told me yet." He looked at his hands. "I spent the year after trying to understand why she hadn't told me. The only answer I arrived at was that she hadn't been certain of something. Of me. Of what I would do." He paused. "I have spent 3 years trying to understand what I had done, or what I had not done. That meant the person who loved me was not certain I could be told. The library held this." Zola said, "You decided to be legible." He looked at her. "That's what it means," she said, "running transparent. The glacier thing, being readable from a distance. You decided that if she had not been certain, you would become certain. Publicly. Structurally. In your work, in your decisions, in your building." She thought about the atrium, the way it was designed to feel like a body at its healthiest. The bones of it, right from the foundation. You built a research center, and you made sure the atrium said, "Things can be repaired, things can be alive and structured at once." He looked at her for a long time. "She never told me," he said. "You did, in 2 minutes, from the outside." "I read buildings," she said. "I read what they're trying to say." Outside the library, the party shifted, a change in the music's register, the specific softening that marked an event entering its final hours. In 3 days, she had a flight. In 20 minutes, she would need to go back into that room and navigate whatever the toast had left in its wake. She had come here for 1 night. She was not certain, anymore, what she was here for. She did not tell him she was going. She told herself this was because there was nothing to tell. The arrangement had always included her departure. The date had always been Sunday. Nothing had changed except that she had sat in a library with a man and said recognized and meant it in a way she had not meant a word in a very long time. She told herself this was information she was managing, not feelings she was avoiding. Dami sat across from her in the hotel room on Saturday morning, and looked at her with the expression of someone who had decided to let a person arrive at their own realization without being pushed, but was prepared to wait. "You're not packing," Dami said. "I'm thinking about packing," Zola said. "Your flight is at 9 a.m. tomorrow." "I'm aware." Dami was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "My father is Nigerian." She said it the way she sometimes said things, without preamble, as if continuing a conversation that had been happening in some adjacent space. "His name is Adebayo. He moved to Seoul 26 years ago. He met my mother here. They separated when I was 7. A pause. "I found out 2 years ago that he had a daughter in London, from a relationship before my mother. Before Seoul." She looked at Zola. "Her name is also Zola." The room was very still. "Dami," Zola said. "I know," she said. "I know it might not be. There are probably other Zola Adebisis in London who are exactly your age, with exactly your profession, and whose father left when they were 12. She did not look away. "But I looked at a photograph he had, and I have been working beside you for 6 weeks, and I have been trying to figure out how to say this since week 2. Zola sat with this. Her father, Adebayo Adebisi, who had left on her 12th birthday, who had gone back to a life he had not fully left, who had never come back, who had, she was only now understanding, not disappeared but rerouted, to Seoul, to a Korean woman, to a daughter who had her father's eyes and was currently sitting across from her in a hotel room holding 6 weeks of careful silence and the terrifying specific hope of someone who has decided that the truth is worth the risk of being wrong. "Show me the photograph," Zola said. Dami took out her phone. It was her father, 26 years younger, standing in a Seoul street, laughing at something outside the frame, with the specific, unguarded joy of a man who had not yet become the weight her mother had carried alone, and that Zola had carried quietly since she was 12. She was looking at her father. She was looking at her sister. She had come to Seoul for a building. She found out on Saturday morning, 16 hours before her flight, what Seoul had actually sent her. Back to 7 a.m. at Incheon International. She was at Gate 47 with her boarding pass and her carry-on, and 16 hours of a Saturday that had rearranged everything she understood about what she had come here to find, and Kwon Jae-il was standing at the gate entrance in yesterday's suit, with no jacket and no phone, and the specific, stripped-back quality of a man who had removed everything extraneous because he had one thing to say and wanted to say it without anything in the way. "Don't get on that plane," he said. She had told him earlier. The deal was one night. He had said, "I know what the deal was." She had said, "Then you know this is the morning after." And he had said, "I lied. Not about the arrangement, about being fine when you left." She had put her boarding pass down. She was still holding her passport. She looked at him and said, "How did you know which gate?" "Dami," he said. "She texted me at 6:15. She looked at her boarding pass in her hand. She thought about a vertical garden deciding whether to trust its structure. She thought about her father's face in a photograph, laughing in a city she had not known was connected to him. She thought about a grandfather who had stood at the base of an atrium installation for 20 minutes and felt repaired, and had known her name before she walked through his door. She thought about a library and the word recognized, and what it had cost her to say it, and what it had cost him to hear it, and what that mutual cost had meant. She thought about her mother, who had carried everything alone for 17 years, who had told Zola, "You build for the people who stay. You leave before the ones who won't." She looked at Jael. "Your mother used us," she said. "I know. I spoke to her last night. For 2 hours. What did you say?" "I said that what she did was a manipulation, and that it damaged trust, and that I would not pretend otherwise." A pause. "I also said that the outcome was not something I was capable of regretting, and that she should not take that as a vindication of her method." She almost smiled. "The Yoon arrangement," she said, "is over. It was never mine to accept. My grandfather is, I discovered last night, furious with my mother. Not because of the Yoon family, but because he says, you do not arrange a person's life the way you arrange flowers. He is 80 years old, and he is not wrong." She looked at the departures board. London Heathrow. Final boarding. "I have a company," she said. "In Peckham. I know. I have a sister," she said. It was the first time she had said the word. It landed in the middle of her chest, like a key finding a lock that had been waiting. "In Seoul. I found out yesterday." He was very still. "Dami." "Yes." She looked at him. "I am not staying for you," she said. "I need you to understand that. I am not rearranging my life for a man I have known for 6 weeks because he crossed an airport terminal looking like he hadn't slept." "I know," he said. "I'm staying because I have a sister who has been sitting beside me for 6 weeks, not knowing how to say it, and because I don't leave before I understand what I came to find." She paused. "And because there is an installation in your atrium that still needs 2 more weeks to root properly, and I told it I would be there." He held her gaze. "And?" he said. She looked at him for a long moment. At a man who had read a building like a language, who had lost someone without ever being certain he had been fully known by her, and had spent 3 years trying to become legible rather than closed. Who had sat in a library and said, "You did in 2 minutes what I had not been able to do in 3 years." The library held them in its particular stillness, and Zola looked at him and understood something she had been circling for 6 weeks without naming. The glacier. She had thought of it as armor. She was revising. Armor was something you put on. What she was looking at was something different. A man who had made himself as legible as possible because legibility felt like the opposite of what had been lost. If he was readable from a distance, no one who loved him would ever again be uncertain of what he was. The logic of grief was not always logical, but it was always specific, and this version of it made complete sense to her. She had her own version. Her father had left on her 12th birthday. He had not said goodbye. He had simply been there in the morning and not there in the afternoon, his absence communicating everything his presence had apparently been unable to say. She had spent the years after building things for other people's important moments because she had understood, at 12, with the specific and permanent understanding of a child who has absorbed a lesson they were not meant to receive, that her own important moments were not things she could rely on anyone to build for. She would design. She would construct. She would make spaces for everyone else's joy and everyone else's grief and everyone else's love, and she would stand at the edge of those spaces as the person who made them possible without ever being inside them. She had been doing this for 17 years. She looked at Jael and thought, "You and I have been building for everyone except ourselves." She did not say this. The library was holding enough already, but she thought it, and she let herself think it, and it sat in her chest with the specific quality of a thing that had been true for a long time and had finally been looked at directly. "I am sorry about the pregnancy," she said, "that you did not know, that you were not given the chance to know." He nodded once, a nod that carried the weight of every conversation he had not been able to have about this. "She would have told you," Zola said. "In her own time, people don't withhold things because they doubt the other person. They withhold things because they are not yet certain of their own feelings about them. That is not the same thing." He looked at her. Something in his expression shifted. Not resolved, not healed, but acknowledged. As if a room that had been holding something in the dark had allowed the light to change. She said, "You did not fail her by being hard to read. You failed no one. Grief that rewrites your culpability is grief doing what grief does, looking for a place to put the weight." He was quiet for a long time. "You are very good at reading what things are trying to say," he said. "Buildings and people are not so different," she said. "The bones are the same." At a man who had come to an airport in yesterday's suit with nothing except the one thing he needed to say. "And," she said, "I would like to know what this becomes. Not as an arrangement, not as one night. As the real thing, built correctly, from the foundation, with both of us aware of what we are building." She picked up her carry-on. "If you still want that, after I've been extremely difficult about it for several weeks." He looked at her with the quality of attention that she had first registered as unusual and had eventually understood was simply how he was made, completely present, without performance. The thing that had been almost a smile in the ballroom on the first night was now something fully resolved, the smile of a man who had been waiting for the room to tell him what it needed and had just heard the answer. "I have been waiting," he said, "for someone who reads foundations." She passed him and walked back through the gate and into the arrivals hall, and he walked beside her, and behind them, the departures board moved on to its next flight. What followed did not happen quickly, because the real things never do. It happened the way a building happens, in stages, each one dependent on what came before, each one necessary, each one built on a foundation that had been set correctly the first time. Zola stayed 6 more weeks, then 6 more. The Adebisi Interior's sole office opened in the new year. Small, in a building in Seongbuk-dong, with a courtyard and morning light that she had selected with the specific, private knowledge of someone who understood what spaces needed to say to the people inside them. Dami sat across from her at the lease signing and cried, briefly and fiercely, and Zola held her hand, and neither of them said what they were feeling, because what they were feeling did not need to be said. Her mother came to Seoul in March. She walked into the Kwon Research Center atrium and stood at the base of the vertical garden for a long time and did not speak. Then she turned to Zola and said, "You designed this." Not a question. "Yes," Zola said. Her mother looked at the installation. 240 species of plant, rooted now, alive, reaching upward through 12 floors of structure that held them without concealing them. She said, "Your grandmother would have known the names of every single one of these." "I know," Zola said. "That's why I used them." Her mother looked at her with the look that Zola had been carrying her whole life. The love that had survived everything. The love that had stayed. "You built something," she said, "that tells the truth." "I always try to," Zola said. As for Jae-gil, it grew the way she had told him it would. From the foundation, built correctly, both of them awake to what they were making, not without difficulty, not without the specific work of two people who had both learned, at considerable cost, not to let themselves be fully known, now choosing to be known anyway. There were conversations that were not easy. There were mornings where the old habits reasserted themselves and had to be noticed and set aside. There was a night in January where he told her something about the months after the accident that he had not told anyone, and she sat with him in the specific way she had learned to sit with difficult spaces, fully present, not trying to fix, understanding that some things needed to be held before they could be repaired. There was a morning in February when she woke up in his apartment and looked at the Han River light and thought, "I know what this space needs. I know what it is trying to say. I know what I am building." She had come to Seoul for a building. She had built something she had not known she was missing. She had found a sister in the same city as a man who read foundations. She had come to Seoul. The truth of it was, for all of it, the city had known before she did. She had not planned for any of this. She had planned for 6 weeks, and a portfolio piece, and a contract pitch she had not been given the opportunity to make. She had planned for professional advancement, and a clean departure, and a story she told herself was simple. She had not planned for a grandfather who said repaired. She had not planned for a sister who had been sitting 6 feet away from her for 6 weeks, holding a photograph and a question she did not know how to ask. She had not planned for a library, and a man in it, and the word recognized used in a way that meant something she had not used it to mean in a very long time. She had not planned to find, in a city she had come to for entirely professional reasons, the specific, private collection of things that her life had been quietly assembling itself toward without her permission. The building had known. She thought about this sometimes, in the months that followed. The Kwon Research Center atrium, designed to feel like a body at its healthiest, to say recovery is possible, to say that structure and life were not opposites. She had designed it as a professional statement. She had walked into it and felt something she had filed as professional appreciation. She understood now that it had been recognition, that she had designed, without knowing she was designing it, a room for the thing she was about to find. If this story found something inside you that needed to be found, leave a comment below. And if you know someone who needed to hear that the things you come for are not always the things you find, and that the things you find are sometimes better, send this to them. They will know why. New stories every week. Subscribe so you never miss one.